Yo, what is going on today, guys? So we're back here for an updated best decks to play in ranked. So I'm someone who's been hovering around the top 1000 to top 500 range all season, and I just want to give you guys the best deck list so you guys can hopefully either achieve the rank you one hit, whether that be like just getting in the Ultra Ball, going from Ultra Ball into Masters, or even if you are chasing that top 1000 currently like I am. So this is technically one of the most diverse metas we've had. And for the first decks, let's just go into all of the Silvally variants and let's choose what flavor you would actually like to play. So starting off with the most represented Silvally where I am in the top 1000 is probably going to be Silvally Charizard. And the main reason is it's just very good in the grass matchup. Is Buzzwole is one of the most represented deck, if not the most represented deck, just in ranked in general. So, Charizard is a big counter as it does one-shot Buzzwole even with a Leaf Cape. Yeah, so essentially this just takes the power of Silvally. And it takes Charizard, the power of Charizard, and then Silvally helps with the weakness of Charizard. So the main problem with Charizard last season was Charizard was extremely weak to Oricorio, and there's just not a good fire type, bro. Let's just be real. There's just not a good fire type that's a non-EX Pokemon to be able to deal with it. So Charizard was left basically just getting a hard counter to Oricorio, but with the introduction of Silvally, because it is colorless, it basically fixes that bad matchup and just makes Charizard one of the best EX Pokemon in the game. So this is an average list that you see. Some decks, do play different support ratios. I've seen some with no Sabrina, some play a Leaf. I've seen some builds with one Gladion and then an extra support card. But this is the one that won the Earth These Days tournament, so it is going to be 2-2-2 for the Silvally / Gladion package. Then just a 2-1-2 Charizard package with the 2 rare candies. Lily, Mara, Sabrina, very average stuff. Yeah. It's just a very strong deck. You have Silvally, if you go second. If you go first with Charmander, Charizard, bro, it's just, you have a good going first and second deck, and you just don't really have any weaknesses. The deck that probably beats this deck the most is going to be Naganadel Guzzlord, just because, the poison damage is very nice to be able to put Charizard in range of Guzzlord, elusive meaning into the 120 attack, especially if you have a Nihilego on the bench, because you're going to be taking for 20 damage every turn. And if your opponent has to get a KO and Charizard is in the active spot, they're going to have to go through 2 Pokemon. So that's just going to be just a lot of poison damage. And then Guzzlord could easily just clean up and finish the game. Now let's get into the next flavor of Silvally. We're going to have the Rampardos variant. So the Rampardos variant was kind of I'm not going to say dying or falling off, but I didn't really see it a lot in top 1000. But I think because Oricorio is back on the rise, basically Silvally Rampardos has picked up again. Plus, Rampardos is just one of the most broken cards with the addition of rare candy. So yeah, it's just Silvally Rampardos. You have Silvally due to the 100 damage, and hopefully then you have Gladion the 10 out the deck. Hopefully you can draw the Skull Fossil or Candy in the Rampardos or the Cranidos Rampardos, and you just have you have 3 strong attackers that are all non-EX Pokemon. Your opponent has to go through 3 of these. If you don't brick on the Skull Fossil. This is just a sample list. Some people play the Giant Cape. So the Giant Cape in Silvally decks has a couple uses. So one, if Silvally is at full HP and you have a Giant Cape, you do actually live a Buzzwole attack, or you can, if you're at full HP, you can live a fellow Silvally attack in case your opponent actually has a Geo in their deck. So some of these decks do run Geo, some opt to run the red just to be able to get the one shot with Rampardos onto something like a Buzzwole, for example. So obviously, in the Silvally decks, because you are playing so many support cards, the ratios can change. This is just a sample list that did pretty good at a recent tournament. I'm pretty sure it got 8th place at the Earth Days. So for the next flavor, we're gonna actually have one of the most on the rise Silvally variants, which is gonna be Silvally, Zorora, and Oricorio. So I was actually playing this deck a decent amount, and it's pretty good. I will say though, it can be bricky 100% because if you go first and you lead Oricorio, which is why a lot of these builds, you would love to have 2 Oricorios, but to be honest, it's a little bit too bricky if you do go first, because if you do go first, you want to see Zorora, mainly because you will get the energy advantage from its ability, and you could always don something later on in the game. But essentially this variant is you have the Dawn play, so if you do go first and you actually have the God combo of Type Null in the active spot, Zorora on the bench, you have Silvally and a Dawn, you can do 100 damage on your very next turn, and you basically one-shot their Type Null if they did put energy on it, and then you just get a really big swing of momentum, and you kind of just probably win the game from there, depending on what deck you are facing. But then obviously the Zorora, sometimes if you do go first, being able to do 50 damage on your next turn, because usually going first is very bad. Sometimes it can be good in certain matchups, and then we just have the Oricorio, which just walls off these EX Pokemon like Charizard, Solgaleo, and just anything like Buzzwole even. And this is like just the average one. Like some decks do play 2 Dons for the consistency. I think more people just choose to run 1 Don basically because they want like the most like amount of supporters they can run. Then like someone like PCL, Cyrus, Sabrina, Dawn, Mars, Giovanni, just the average list. And then once again with that giant cape I was talking about in the previous Rampardos version, we have 1 down here with the 2 Pokeballs. So like I said, the giant cape is just very useful in these Silvally matchups. Some people do choose to play like a Rocky Helmet instead of Giovanni, just because, you know, it can be like more useful overall. But you can always get Guzma, so that is always the problem of running Rocky Helmet over Geo. And then like there's like a kind of like another version of these Oricorio Silvally decks that I've seen that aren't running Zorora. So this one isn't very popular, but it did pretty decent, and I thought I would just like at least showcase it. So I actually ran into this yesterday and I was kind of surprised because I saw Silvally and then I saw Oricorio and Shaman. I was like, huh, that's very interesting. You know, I've never actually seen that before, but you know, it makes sense because, you know, you definitely want your Oricorios to live in the matchups. Like, for example, like against like Darkrai Giratina, you're going to want the Shaman for the chip damage. Even though Darkrai Giratina isn't as popular anymore, I actually think he's like kind of making a comeback with the Poison variant, but it's just like a different spin. I definitely think the Zorora one is way better and like more consistent, but this is just another version that I just wanted to showcase in case you guys were like interested. And then down here is just 1 giant cape as well, because, you know, it does get cut off. So for the final main Silvally variant you're going to be seeing is going to be another fire flavor. So it essentially just Silvally and Blastphalon / Lollipop, Clown, whatever you want to call it. So this is the most average version with 2 leaves because, you know, you don't really want Blastphalon in the active spot. You definitely want it as the end game, just nuke. So the thing about Blastphalon is it does 130 damage, and obviously because it is an Ultra Beast, you can use Lusamine. So essentially what this deck does is you have 2 Silvallis that your opponent goes through, or maybe just even 1. But essentially, that Silvally hopefully knocks out something while it's alive. The 2 energy goes in the discard pile. You could put Blastphalon in, and hopefully it's at full HP because it does do 70 damage. So there's a possibility that if you've already taken damage, like for example, if you lead it and then leaf out, you actually might blow yourself up at the same time as blowing your opponent's Pokemon up. So you have to be aware of that. But essentially, you Silvally usually gets a knockout, then it gets knocked out, then you can put Blastphalon in, and it's really good in the Buzzwole matchup. I think it's definitely like fallen off. I think more people were just favoring Charizard, as, you know, Charizard just more consistent and overall just, you know, stronger. But it's still a variant you will see here and there, especially on the top 1000, because, you know, it is strong against Buzzwole. But yeah, you just lose a mean after the Silvally dies, Blastphalon, boom, blow something up, and there's not a lot of things that are going to live that 130 HP, especially if they've taken previous damage from Silvally. And then, you know, just like average stuff like Guzma, Sabrina. I've seen decks like play, what is it, bro? I've seen like other ones, you know, not play Guzma, play like Geo, stuff like that, even like a red, so you can one-shot a, like, for example, like they play a red, like if you actually like have like a long grind game somehow, and you do like manually build up the energy on Blastphalon and don't use Lusamine, I do see some people taking on red to be able to guarantee one-shot the Guzzwole. Not the Guzzwole, bro, Buzzwole. But yeah, that's just like a, you know, obviously, like I said, bro, many times, like these Silvally variants, you just play so many support cards. There's always gonna be a little bit of change. Obviously, you know, Cyrus could also be in place of Sabrina. Anyways, so those are for all these Silvally variants. So let's just go on to what is probably the most represented and the strongest deck in the game, which is going to be Buzzwole. So next up for the most common and probably the most consistent and best deck in the game. So we're gonna have Buzzwole / you know, the Grass Ultra Beast package. And by far, this is the most common one now with 2 Cortanas over 2 Pheromosas. So, you know, something like 2 Lusamine is like kind of standard now. I know like at the very beginning of the season, a lot of people were experimenting with only 1 Lusamine, but like 2 is just broken because you want to see it, and that's why I always ran 2 in my decks as well. And basically they also dropped an Erica. So this build, I was also playing a Sabrina. Sabrina is definitely picking up in a lot of popularity in the Ultra Beast build. It's either Sabrina or Repel. You know, kind of just depends on like what your preference is. Because, you know, Sabrina is, you know, can work in every matchup, where like Repel, sometimes you run into a matchup where it's just useless, like such as like a Charizard. Like, you know, like obviously early game it could be useful to like disrupt the Pokemon before they evolve, but like late game it can be a dead card. So Sabrina overall, like, you know, is more useful. Something like Guzma is pretty standard in Mars as well. Some form of hand disruption. Also, instead of playing the Leaf Cape, this build is playing a Giant Cape and a Rocky Helmet. So Rocky Helmet is definitely picking up in this deck as well. But the reasoning for the Giant Cape over the Leaf Cape is essentially because we have 1 non-grass Pokemon in this deck, Celesteela, 120 HP. So you might be thinking, what does 120 HP that you definitely want to live? Well, a fellow Buzzwole mirror match, also a Solgaleo, and you know, something like Guzzwole as well. Guzzlord, I just keep getting them mixed up. I don't know why they're both Buzz and Guzz, like whatever, bro. But yeah, this giant cape, you know, overall is more useful. Sometimes you definitely do want that leaf cape, especially in the mirror match. I think leaf cape is overall stronger. In certain situations on Buzzwole specifically, obviously the giant cape is better for Celesteela, but a lot of people are just playing giant cape, like I said, for the ability to put on Silvally, and then this is just a pretty common lineup. So this deck basically just has it all, bro. You have that early 40 damage attacker, you have the Pheromosa being able to snipe and get something weak in the back, and then maybe being able to Cyrus it. You have Lucamine for the energy generation when something does die. And the main reason for 2 Cortanas over the 2 Pheromosas is because of the rise of Oricorio coming back up. You know, Cortana just, you know, is able to 2-shot those Oricorios, you know, provided no healing or giant capes. And this deck would like otherwise struggle because the only main way to deal with the Oricorios with only 1 Cortana would be to go for the Celesteela coin flips, which you would just probably rather not rely on, you know, if you know what I mean. Because I personally yesterday I went for like 8 Celesteela flips, and I think I landed like 1 out of 8 in like desperate situations. So relying on Celesteela the least amount is just the most preferable way to beat Oricorio. But we also have some other versions. You know, some people do still prefer to run the 2 Pheromosas and then the 1 Cortana. So this build is essentially the same, but instead of the Rocky Helmet and the Giant Cape, they're playing 2 Leaf Capes, and instead of a Sabrina and a Cyrus, they're just playing 2 Cyruses because, you know, we do have 2 Pheromosas. So both of these builds did do very good at the recent 900 person tournament, almost 1,000. It was 991 players. So this is just a different take, but besides that, like, you know, the Erica, Mars, Guzma, then we have another version. So this version is just choosing to drop the Cortanas in place for Pheromosa. This is like also a pretty common version. I think it's kind of like fallen off, though. Like, it's still definitely strong, you know, just definitely worse in some matches, like such as like Charizard. But because, you know, 2 Pheromosas, we have the 2 Cyruses, and because we aren't playing Cortana, we have 2 Ericas, and we just have more room. This is one of the decks still playing the 1 Lucamine version in favor of more support cards. I definitely prefer the other 2 versions over this, but it is still strong and is still placed pretty high. And we just have, like, you know, both like 2 hand disruption cards. We have the red card and the Mars, and this one's playing a leaf cape and a giant cape instead of the Rocky Helmet and one of those 2. So it's just a different take on the deck that I just wanted to mention. So next up for the Ultra Beast, we have actually Guzzlord. So Guzzlord is on the rise, and if you've seen my channel, I've been gassing up Guzzlord a lot because I actually think it's one of the best decks. So we have 2 different variants. So we have the variant that does not play Nagando, and then we just have the 6 Pokemon package. So this one's a little bit more consistent because, you know, you have less Pokemon, you are able to find the ones you want. So this one did pretty good in the tournament as well, and, you know, I do see it fairly common on ranked. So it's going to be 2 Guzzlords, 2 Nihilgos, and 2 Celesteelas, the 2 Lucamines, and then because we aren't playing the extra 4 Pokemon with the Nagando, we actually get to play a lot of more support cards. So they're playing Pokemon Center Lady, Team Rocket Grunt just for that additional energy deletion combined with Guzzlord. Then they have the red card as well. And they just have Sabrina, Cyrus, and Mars, you know, the traditional. So they have 2 hand disruptions, and obviously we have the 2 poison darts down here because we always want poison to be online with Nihilgo. Yeah, so essentially, bro, it's just a Guzzlord poison variant, bro, and it's pretty decent. I definitely don't, I think this one does work, and I see a lot more people having success with this version. I personally prefer the other variant, which is Nagando. So this is the version that I covered actually on my channel, and actually ended up getting 9th place at that almost 1,000 person tournament. So essentially, you have Nagando, which I like because if you do go first and you actually do get Nagando plus Nihilgo, you can start doing 60 damage, which, you know, is going to one-shot a lot more things. Like, for example, where if a Charmander or a Blitzin is in the active spot, or even going second, for example, if you land like 1 heads flip with Poipole onto a type null and they don't have any healing cards or a giant cape, and you do have both Nagando and Nihilgo on the following turn, you can't actually knock it out. So I just personally prefer Nagando because I also feel like it's really good into the Charizard matchup to get the poison down on Charizard because I don't really want to sacrifice my Nihilgos. So this is the version. You know, and you have a lot of Pokemon. You do have 2, 4, 6, 8. You have 8 basic Pokemon, so sometimes it is hard to find the one you do want off the Pokeballs. So the deck is very bricky. But I think this deck has actually a strong matchup into everything besides Buzzwole. Even Buzzwole is doable, bro, as long as you don't brick. And you can get like a Poison Barb and like Nagando online pretty early to be able to knock out these Cortanas or these Pheromosas. So Guzzlord is, or like, basically you want to knock out a Pheromosa because you want to be able to place Guzzlord down and start, you know, putting at least 1 energy on it so you can't Lucamine onto the floor. And obviously, a lot of these decks are only running 1 Pheromosa, so if you can't knock out that Pheromosa, Guzzlord will be safe from there on. Then, you know, something like, you know, just 2 Lucamines, you need Lucamine because it is 4 energy for Guzzlord. So if you use Lucamine and you have no energy on Guzzlord, you actually will only be at 3 for the turn. So you always want to be able to have like 1 energy on Guzzlord, by the way, before you do Lucamine, if you do want to go for like Tyrannical Hole. And so this is like a common list. I've also seen lists play only 1 Celesteela and add a Sabrina or a red card. Personally, I really like the two Nahelgos, but lately I've actually been only playing 1. I've been playing this list, and then I've actually added a Sabrina. Yeah, so this is like the current version I'm currently using with this deck, and I was able to climb back up to top 1,000 yesterday after dropping like 150 points, just because I went on like a very bad losing streak. I was like swapping decks too much, dude, and I kept facing the bad matchups and bricking like all day. But with this Guzzlord deck, I was able to farm a bunch of Charizards and get back up to top 1,000, or like I think I'm like right outside top 1,000 now, because you know, people have been playing ranked today. The Sabrina is just nice, you know, be able to Sabrina something in. I mean, everybody knows how powerful Sabrina is. And I think this matchup, or I think the Naganadel version has a way better matchup into Oricorio, which I personally like, because I do like fight a lot of Oricorios right now where I am in ranked. So speaking of Oricorio, we actually have Oricorio Magnezone, which isn't doing really good in tournaments, but in at least in ranked, I am seeing it a lot, because you know, Magnezone does one-shot Silvallies, and Oricorio does wall off stuff like Charizard, Buzzwole, etc. So we have this, you know, classic Oricorio Magnezone shape, and it's kind of just been there, dude. And there's really nothing new about the deck. It's basically doing the same thing it's been doing. You have 2 PCLs instead of a Lily, essentially because you want to keep Oricorio alive from these Cortana attacks, and PCL basically heals it up. But it will heal it, obviously, you know, all the way up with the addition of Shaman. So you just really don't want the Cortanas to be able to knock out Oricorio, which is PCLs. And yeah, you know, just Mars Cyrus, you have the ILNL in place of, you know, something like a Pokecom to be able to, you know, sometimes go for like a better hand, you know, if, in case you want like Magnetons and Magnezones. Then just Guzma, because you don't want to really attack into like stuff like Poison Barbs or Rocky Helmets or Oricorios, depending on the matchups. And then, you know, just a giant cape down here to let Magnezone or Oricorio live an additional hit that it usually would not. So, you know, it's just a very strong list, man. That's pretty good on ranked. You know, it's always just one of those like anti-meta decks. I feel like this is probably going to be there till the end of the game, or until we get something stronger than Magnezone to pair with Oricorio. And then next up, we have tried and true Solgaleo Shiinotic, probably one of the most annoying decks to face in ranked personally, because dude, if they get the God combo going second Solgaleo, sometimes you can't win. Sometimes you just can't win because it's just so fast. Cosmog for and Cosmoan for a Solgaleo, you have the Shiinotics to be able to search for it. Then you have, you know, these ones, they have 10 more HP. They are weak to fire, which, you know, is something that can be negative, especially if the rise of these Charmanders, like they can attack you twice. But I think I'd rather play this one and be able to attack with it in case the 10 damage does come up, because for example, if you're attacking to like a dark Pokemon weak to grass, you will do 30 damage at least, which is something that can come up maybe, and maybe like Darkrai Giratina. But essentially, bro, this is just the list, man. Lily, red is to be able to do 140 damage with Solgaleo, one-shotting stuff like Buzzwole without a cape. And then also, you know, something like Darkrai if they don't have a cape. You just want any 140 HP EX Pokemon. Sabrina, Cyrus, bro, 2 rare candies, and then 2 Pokeballs down here. There's not really much to say, dude. It loses to Oricorio, and it loses to Oricorio in itself. It's basically like old genetic Apex Charizard, where you had Moltres in the active spot and you didn't really play your opponent. You basically just played by yourself, you know, ramping up the energy on Charizard, and then if you had a bunch of energy, bro, and your opponent had no way to knock them out, bro, you just attack it like 2 or 3 times in a row, and then you win. Solgaleo is the same thing, bro. You set up 2 lions, and you most likely win unless you like run into the Oricorio deck. But in case you do run into Oricorio, there's a couple of tech options you can do. So some people have been putting Magernia in as an additional Pokemon, because, you know, for 2 energy, you do 80 damage to Oricorio, because Oricorio obviously has that ability to not take damage from EX Pokemon. So some people have been playing Magernia, has 1 retreat cost, but some people also have been taking in the new promo card, which it should be down here, which is Dark Main Necrozma for 110 HP. It is 3 energy, bro, so it's a little bit more, and a 2 retreat cost, which can be bad, but it has 20 more HP than Magernia, so it does actually live 2 Oricorio attacks, and also it is a steady 100 damage to everything instead of Magernia only doing 80 to stuff with an ability. So if you are playing ranked and you are running into a lot of Oricorio, but you still want to play Shiinotic Solgaleo because you don't want to think, you can just take out one of these support cards, something like a maybe even like a red, or maybe just a red or something, because who knows. And And then you could just slot in the Magernia or the Duskmane Necrozma, and then you have a way of dealing with Oricorio. Even though it's still going to be a bad matchup, you do have a way to beat it instead of it just being an insta loss. So for the last deck that I see a lot in top 1000 is going to be the tried and true Giratina Darkrai. So I think we all know what this deck does. You have Darkrai chipping, you have Giratina ramping itself up, and then you just have 20 million support cards. So a lot of these Darkrai Giratina decks, because you know Darkrai Giratina is still a strong deck, but definitely can lose to a lot of these decks, like especially like Buzzwole and Guzzlord. So they basically have 2 red cards and more, so they have 3 hand disruptions basically to prevent your opponent from actually being able to play the game while they can. Plus, you know, you actually want to be able to disrupt your opponent so they want to actually see the red card. And essentially, this is the new list of support cards they are playing. Sabrina, 2 PCLs, Leaf, Mars, Cyrus, Red, Guzma, you know, pretty standard. Then they just have the 1 Rocky Helmet and then the 1 Giant Cape for different scenarios. So this is just a classic Darkrai Giratina deck, bro. I mean, there's not really much to talk about. Probably the worst matchups are something like Buzzwole, just because, you know, Darkrai is weak to grass, and, you know, like it just kind of has everything. It has like bench snipers too to be able to damage both of them in the range of Buzzwole. Plus, you know, that if Giratina gets knocked out first, it is pretty hard. I mean, it's basically impossible for Darkrai Giratina to win. And then obviously Guzzlord, 1, you can just delete energy, and then 2, Darkrai, or not Darkrai, but Giratina is weak to dark, so Guzzlord is pretty good in that matchup. And then obviously stuff like Charizard, bro, you know, just one shots them back to back if they get it early on and you can't set up fast enough. But there's actually a new Darkrai Giratina variant that's like pretty more it's like very more like it's like way more common. I don't know why it took me so hard, but you know what I meant. So this is the way more common variant now with Nihilego, Giratina, and the 2 poison barbs. And the reason this variant I think is more popular, 1, it just has a better matchup in the Oricorio, plus the poison damage from Nihilego plus the Darkrai chips just puts a lot more things in range of either a Darkrai attack or a Giratina attack, you know, in case one of them is missing. Then something like 2 Professor Research, 1 PCL, 1 Cyrus, you know, 1 Guzma, Sabrina, you know, there's just a classic, the Mars for the hand disruption. Then, you know, there's a potion, 2 poison barbs, and then the 2 giant capes. Basically, you just have 1 Nihilego, bro, and then you place a poison barb. If they attack into it, bro, they're going to be taking poison damage plus the Darkrai chips. It's 40 damage a turn, bro. Not even counting their turn as well. So it's going to be like 60 damage if they can't take that poison off. And it's just a lot of damage that stacks up, bro. And that's essentially what it is. A little bit better in the Oricorio matchup because 1, the poison plus the Darkrai chips will start deleting those birds. Plus, you know, Nihilego can actually theoretically attack in the Oricorio when necessary. So I think because of the rest of Oricorio, this is definitely the more like favored variant, although you still do see the pure Darkrai Giratina as well. I just personally, I think I see this like maybe like 5% more, yeah, you know, but it's not a big difference. Anyways, I think that does it for all the best decks to play in ranked. I think these are the most common. I think these are the best variants. You do have some other variants that like some other decks you might see here and there, some like rogue options such as like Stoutland decks, or you know, just some other weird decks like Greninja Silvally is like not really represented, bro. Like it really hard fell off for all the other Silvally variants. So here, like there's also is like Greninja or Oricorio that you might see here and there, dude, but it's not like the most popular. These are just the most popular and like the most consistent decks that I see people doing good with. So I just wanted to give you guys like the best list. I don't want to give you like every you know, I could give you guys like 10 more lists, but those lists are just not more like those decks like might just lose your rank, to be honest, bro. So I just want to give you like the best of the best list. So I hope you guys do enjoy the video, and I hope this was very useful because I just wanted to do an updated meta best deck list, you know. I don't know why I can't talk today, bro, but you guys know what I mean. Anyways, if you made it this far, peace out and have a lovely day as always.